Hey there. Today I will do a video by request. Someone asked me to share some thoughts with people who are going to buy their first fountain pen. I think that's an excellent idea. Now, it should be pointed out that although I own a number of fountain pens and I love writing with fountain pens, I think I am by no means an expert. I'm sure that some of my viewers may just know more about fountain pens than I do, and that's fine. But if you hear anything that you don't agree with, then please just put down a comment and everyone can learn, right? So I think this could be a valuable opportunity to exchange information and have a kind of open forum where people of all levels of expertise can participate and do things and learn from each other. So I have made a couple of notes, so forgive me if I look at my notes every now and then. I will just go through a number of points that I think are important when considering to buy your first pen. Clearly that will be my personal opinion, but again, as I said, if you disagree or if you have another opinion, just put down a comment. We can discuss stuff. My first issue is what I recommend you to do is to buy a cheaper pen. I say cheaper pen, I don't say cheapest pen. I think this is the cheapest pen I own. It's an old Parker Vector, I think they're called. The Vector is a nice pen, but it's really cheap. If I were you, I would avoid this type of pen, because this is really cheap. I think under 10 euros or maybe 10 euros. By now it's probably more expensive than it was when I got it, but in any case these pens are very, very cheap. So I would avoid this type of pen. What I recommend you'd get is some pen of what you think is a medium price. So of course that will depend on your financial situation, how much you're willing to spend. The only thing I'm saying is what I would avoid is going for that beautiful 400 euro Visconti or something, because fountain pens need a little bit of getting used to. You need to learn how to write with a pen, and with some pens that will be a very smooth process. With other pens it will be a little bit more difficult, but in any case, if you start with a very expensive pen and it turns out that you don't really like writing with a fountain pen, and that's a lot of money, right? So if you start with a cheaper pen, then you have some time to experiment, and if things don't go extremely smoothly, it doesn't really matter. You didn't spend a lot of money. So I think that's my first recommendation. Again, if you buy a very cheap pen, and that's the reason I say you shouldn't get something like this, is you may have high expectations of what a fountain pen is like, that it's a very smooth writing instrument. Well, this is not the smoothest writing instrument in the world. It doesn't write that smoothly. It's very cheap, it has a pretty cheap nib, and it's okay. It's not a bad pen, but there are pens that are infinitely smoother. And if you go for something in the medium range, then I think you will find, you should be able to find a pen that is pleasant to use and at the same time is not too expensive. So the first issue, get a cheaper pen than you might intend to. So don't go for a $200, $300, $400 pen or even more expensive one. Go for something in a medium price range. The second thing I would recommend is, as you start out, stick to cartridges. Don't go for bottled ink straight away. Bottled ink is, I think, one of the main attractions of using a fountain pen, because you can choose from so many different colors. You can maybe even mix your own inks, and that's great. But there's also a bit of a hassle. Filling a fountain pen is a bit more difficult than with a bottle is a bit more difficult than just sticking in a cartridge and being able to write. So I would say put cartridges in your pen until you're very comfortable with filling the pen, with writing with the pen, with carrying the pen, with using the pen in a general manner. And once you're very comfortable, you could consider getting a converter and filling up your pen with ink, ink from a bottle. I think that's, as I said, using bottled ink is great fun, but it's something I think you should work up to. And that may go very rapidly, but it's just cartridges are much easier to use than bottled ink. And if you're learning how to use a new type of pen, and you have to fill it with a bottled ink, and you have ink on your fingers, it may put you off, and I wouldn't want that to happen. My third suggestion is perhaps a little weird, but I suggest you take your new pen everywhere you go. And I suggest you write everything with your new pen. So even if you're just making grocery shopping lists, or if you're writing a simple note to a colleague or your boss or whatever, use your fountain pen. A lot of people use simple ballpoint pens to, make some quick scribbling notes and then, put them somewhere. Use your fountain pen. The more you use it, the more you'll get used to writing with a fountain pen, and writing a bit slower than usual, or holding the pen a little differently, that kind of stuff. You'll get used to that, and that will make the whole learning curve a bit less steep, because you're using it whenever you can. And carrying it with you just, makes you develop a kind of feel for your pen, which I think is good. So carrying it around, it's not some kind of sacred object, but, taking it with you, I think, is a good thing, especially if you start out. The fourth point is very important. Be patient. I have bought pens that I inked up and I could immediately write with them, straight out of the box. On the other hand, let me tell you a little story. My mother once got a Parker fountain pen, which was not cheap. She got it as a gift. She inked it up and nothing happened. And I think she tried to use it for about 2 weeks. She couldn't write with it. She just couldn't. For some reason, that pen didn't agree with her hand, or her hand didn't agree with the pen, or whatever. It just didn't work. She gave it to me, and it wrote straight away. Now, what I'm trying to say here is, I'm not trying to scare you and make you believe that if you buy a pen you may not be able to write with it. I think that's very, it's very uncommon for something like that to happen in such an extreme manner. But I've had a couple of pens that I really had to use for a week until I was comfortable with them, and then suddenly there was this sort of snap moment, and then everything worked fine and I was able to write with it fairly well. But some pens really need the time. They really need some time, well, to get used to your hand. In any case, your hand needs time to get used to that pen, and every pen's different, so don't be put off by that. It's not a ballpoint pen. A ballpoint pen you pick up, you click it, and you can write with it straight away. With a fountain pen, things are different. You have to take your time, and if you're not willing to invest some time in that kind of thing, then you should seriously consider whether fountain pens are the right writing instruments for you. The fifth issue is probably, how should I put that, a bit gratuit. It's a bit obvious. Read about pens. There are some excellent internet fora. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Fountain Pen Network. There's most likely some kind of forum in your own native language, if English is not your language. There are many websites that deal with fountain pens. Visit some websites by manufacturers. Clearly they want to sell their pens to you, but they're also a source of information, right? Check Wikipedia, do stuff like that. Read about pens. The more you read, the more knowledgeable you get, and the more balanced the decision is you can make when it comes to actually picking a pen. I mean, would you like a standard nib? Would you like an oblique nib? I wouldn't start with that if I was you. But these are all considerations. Just the more you know, the easier it is to decide which type of pen is the right one for you. Also, I think that the pen community is very open, and there are many people out there who are extremely knowledgeable, who have dozens, if not hundreds of pens, and in my experience, most of those people are very willing to share their opinions and thoughts with you. So why not use that? I mean, these people are experts. You can email them, you can communicate with them. All of those are opportunities to learn. And again, the more you know, the easier it is to make a decision once the time comes to buy a pen. So I think that's really important. try to learn about pens before using them. Okay, yeah, so once you got a pen, you have it, you're happy with your pen, you get along well, you've written a lot with it, and you have decided that the time has come to start using bottled ink instead of a cartridge. Experiment. There is some ink that's pretty expensive, there is some ink that is pretty cheap. Experiment a lot with different types of ink. Experiment with colors and experiment with brands. Realize that some brands and some specific types of these brands work beautiful in some pens, but terribly in others. It happens. Some pens really like specific colors. For example, this is not a fountain pen, but this is a rollerball by Noodlers, which can be used with fountain pen ink. Whenever I ink this up, it's always with Base Day Blue, which is one of Noodler's, I think, most famous, perhaps infamous, but I like the inks. So, if I use this pen, it's always with Base Day Blue. I never use another color, because I love that color in this pen. And, of course, I mean, there's some other options. This Waterman pen, I love using this with Vert Olive, which is an olive-colored green by J. Herbin. I love that color. I also like red in here, but I don't like brown inks in this pen. I just don't like it. It doesn't look so good. So, experiment. Try to figure out what works for you and what works for your pens. You will find that some inks are very easy to clean. Other inks are much more difficult to clean. So, learn what works well with your specific pen. And that's part of the fun, right? You know, experimenting with different colors, different inks. That's what makes using fountain pens so interesting. Yes. A bit of a warning. Once you are bitten by the fountain pen bug, so to speak, you'll probably want to get more pens. Once you have one, then you may want another one of that brand, or you may want to sample another brand. That's part of the collection fever. I don't really consider myself to be a fountain pen collector, because there is no real system to my collecting. I just like to try a lot of different brands and different pens and different nib sizes. But once you really get hooked, you may want to get yourself a lot of pens. Maybe you'll just stick with one or two, but a lot of people, I think, once they really like this and start to like this and really want to, you know, use pens, they want more and more. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. I mean, of course, if it's a hobby, you can spend as much money as you like, right? You don't have to buy 40 different pens, but it's a bit of a risk. A lot of fountain pen people I know have a number of pens, so it's something you may consider. Okay, another thing I recommend is you get a simple pen pouch. Now, I think many pen pouches are made for 2 pens. There are some for 3 and some for 4 and some made for 40 pens. Get a simple pouch, maybe one for just 1 or 2 pens, maybe leather, maybe nylon, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's just an easy way to transport your pen. You see, it's your pen won't be damaged. You can put it in your bag, but if it's in a protective pouch, it's just easier to work with. It's easy to maintain. I think that's a good idea. It adds to the portability of your pen. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to invest in that pretty early on. Now, of course, if you are thinking of getting more pens, you may want to buy a bigger pouch. But I do think that can really add to the experience of you know, using fountain pens. Okay. I think my final point deals with pen maintenance. Pen maintenance is something you need to think about. I'll give you an example. There is an excellent video on fountain pen parts. So what are the different parts that make up a pen, by Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company. His channel is called Ink Nouveau. And I think the video is called Fountain Pen 101. And I'm not going to do a rerun of that because that would be ridiculous, but I recommend you to check out that video if you're new to this thing. I will just give you a very short, brief demonstration of the different parts of a fountain pen. So this is the pen, this is a watermelon sphere. You take off the cap, this is the cap, this is just a click on cap. Then you have the barrel of the pen, which you can screw off, and then you are left with this. So we have the grip section, the converter, right? The converter is something you use to fill the pen. If you're not sure how to do that, then there's videos of that on YouTube as well. For now, let's stick with this part. So here we have the grip section, which is called the grip section because that's where you grip the pen. It's all very simple. You hold it like this, and then you have a nib, which is this, the metal part, and you have the feed. Now, in this pen, I chose this one because you can disassemble it completely. Don't ever yank on a pen like that if you're not sure whether you can remove it. You can actually break stuff, so be careful. I know I can do this, so that's why I did it, just to show you. Here we have the feed. The feed is what the pen gets the ink from, so the ink flows from the converter into this thing. It's like a capillary action thing. If you don't understand that, that's fine. Just check Wikipedia, capillary action, you'll find out how this works. This is very easy to clean, right? Because I can just take this out, and all the ink that's in here, I can just put it under a tap of water, and it's going to be fine. Here we have the nib. The nib is, I think, the most important part of the pen. Of course, if there's problems with the feed, then you will not get a proper flow, but this is what does the writing. So if this is not smooth, if this is not rounded enough, then your writing will just suffer. So you may want to get a nib that is of a precious metal, say gold, or I don't know, something else, maybe palladium. Those are more expensive, but they are very smooth. This is just stainless steel, and it writes just fine. Especially if this is your first pen, I'm sure that this will be no problem. So in this case, it's very easy to clean the pen, but there are some pens that you cannot disassemble as easily as this one. I think there are two items you may want to consider buying. The third item you need is something you can just, probably everyone has something like that lying around the house. This is my ink cloth. This is my third, I think. It's just a piece of cloth, and if you fill the pen, you can just use this. I have just filled this pen, say, and you can just, wipe it off with your ink cloth. Clearly, you should never wash that. That would be a mortal sin, because it's nice to see which types of inks you use. So here's some Bay State Blue, there is some Nikita, and there's another stuff going on. So that's kind of nice. Two things you may want to get. The first is a bulb syringe. Now, if you don't know what that is, mine looks like this. You also have these things that have this plastic part is actually rubber. I was unable to get one of those. This is a snot sucker, basically. So if you have a baby, you can put this in the nose, you gently squeeze this, and you let it go, and then snot or slime or whatever is sucked in there, which is kind of disgusting, but it can work. You can also use it to clean your fountain pen, which is a very simple, easy thing to do. Let me just reassemble my Waterman here for a second. Right, so this is, let's say this is inky. Right, I want to switch inks. I have used my converter and I've cleaned that, and now I want to clean this. In theory, what you can do is put this into a glass of water and then twist the converter like this, and you see this little piston moving up, and then you suck in water, and then you push the water out again, and you suck up new water, and you push it out again, you suck up some more fresh water, you blow it out again, and then the feed, the ink that's in the feed will just go out. But that takes a long time. And if you use a heavily saturated ink, let's say GL Band 1670 ink, which is also red, which tends to be a little aggressive, good luck with this. This method could actually take you up to an hour to clean. Now, if you have a bulb syringe, I'm not going to demonstrate the actual workings. Again, there's an excellent video on this from Brian Goulet. You fill this up with ink, so this one you can open, you put it under a tap of water, fill it up with ink, put this thing in again, put this in there, you see it just fits, and then you squeeze, and a huge amount of water will be blasted throughout your pen, and it will blow out all the ink. Now that's brilliant. And in that, 2 or 3 of these, and pretty much I think the most aggressive ink will probably be out. So that's really good. Something else you may want to consider getting is something I recently discovered. Now I have to reach around, and it is called JB's Perfect Pen Flush. And this is a mixture of, I think, some ammonia, distilled water. It says distilled water, ammonia, biodegradable I can't read it. Whatever. There's some stuff in there, and this works really well. So what you do is, you should be able to reuse this. What I do is I just take a smaller bottle, like this. See that? I put in some of this stuff. I put this from the bottle into the bulb syringe. I flush it through the pen, catching it in the same bottle. I put it in the bulb syringe again. You flush out the pen a couple of times. So because this contains stuff like ammonia, it will really clean out your pen very quickly. After using this, you have to use water again, because ammonia tends to thin your ink out, and you will get too much of a flow. And too much of a flow is actually a bad thing, because then the ink will just sort of blur out, which is a bit bad. So you could consider getting that. It's not necessary. The method I just showed you is the standard method, so you just, you suck up water and you push it out again. That will work fine. But you may want to consider, I mean, this is a couple of euros. It's very cheap. It's most likely a couple of dollars too. So that's really going to work out. This stuff is, I forgot what I paid for this. It wasn't that expensive. You can do without it. You can also, thin ammonia, what do you call that? Dilute ammonia a little bit. But it's not necessary. With most inks, you can just flush them out with water, but if you have a bit of an aggressive ink, then you may want to use something like that. So, I think that's pretty much my tips and suggestions for people starting out with fountain pens. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you don't agree with me, then that's, of course, absolutely fine. Put your comments down below. I'll be happy to read them and reply to them. I hope this is helpful to people. Let me know if it is helpful. Let me know if it's not helpful. I don't mind. I won't be offended. I wish you the best of luck, and get a fountain pen and have some fun. And that's it. So I'll see you later.